What if the people who say they love you are the very ones keeping you small? They held you when you cried. They fed you. They showed you what the world was and what love was supposed to be. But somewhere along the way, words became walls, expectations became chains, and the home that once felt safe began to turn into a prison you were never allowed to name. They told you to forgive, to stay, to understand their pain before you ever understood your own. And little by little, you started to disappear, piece by piece, inside a loyalty that never gave you permission to live as a whole. But what if that was never love? What if it was guilt disguised as care, control wrapped in tradition? What if the family you were born into is the very reason you still haven't become who you really are? Carl Jung warned us about this. He said the greatest burden a child can carry is the unlived life of their parents. And maybe now, something inside you is beginning to awaken to that burden, because the most dangerous prisons have no bars. They are built with silence, with sacrifice, with the quiet belief that your needs must always come last. But that doesn't have to. Continue. Stay with me until the end of this video, because something deep within you is ready to remember. And if these words have already stirred something in your chest, if you feel this silent calling, then you are exactly where you need to be. If this journey speaks to your soul, like this video and subscribe to the channel so this truth can reach other souls still trapped in the name of love. Now take a deep breath and come with me. There's something you need to see. When love starts to shrink you, do you remember the first time you felt wrong? Just for being yourself? Maybe it was a sideways glance at dinner, a cold silence when you laughed too loud, or that phrase that sounded like love but always came with a condition. If you really loved me, you'd act differently. At first, it felt like care. Then it felt like doubt. And then, without noticing, you started to shrink. Just a little, just enough not to disturb. You spoke less, gave in more, smiled through the pain. That's how it begins. Love becomes a frame too narrow for who you truly are. And you, born whole, begin to fold yourself into pieces just to fit others' expectations. But is that still love? Or is it fear? Is it tenderness? Or control disguised as presence? They say they love you, but that love demands. It traps. You'll hurt me if you leave. You're abandoning me. After everything I've done for you, and little by little, what was once a bond becomes a knot. You start wondering if you even have the right to leave, the right to choose differently, the right to exist fully. Carl Jung called this psychic possession when someone else is unresolved. Emotions begin to live inside you, and without realizing it, you carry wounds that aren't yours, desires that aren't yours, lives that aren't yours. But who would you be if you no longer needed permission? Maybe what you call love is really the echo of an old bond, where loving always meant dimming yourself, just enough not to be rejected, just enough to be accepted. But there's a place within you that never dimmed, a point of light that still pulses, still remembers, still resists. And it's that spark that begins to disturb the silence. It's that flame that announces what comes next. The silence where you disappeared. There was a time when your eyes sparkled, when you spoke, when your ideas ran free like wind through an open field. But one day, your light became too much. Don't say that. You're being dramatic. You think too much. And so, you fell silent. First your voice, then your laughter, then your desire. It didn't happen overnight. It was slow. A gesture here, a veiled humiliation there. And when you realized it, you no longer knew who you were, only who you needed to be to keep belonging. Your family loved you, yes, but they loved a version of you that made no noise, that didn't question, That obeyed. They said it was for your own good. But what they called education was just pruning. They cut the freest branches of your being because growing in that house was too dangerous. After all, a woman who shines too brightly illuminates the shadows others would rather keep hidden. And so, you chose to dim, as if dressing differently were an insult, as if thinking for yourself were a betrayal, as if following your soul were a burden to those who gave you life. But those who truly love you are never afraid of your blooming. True love doesn't demand you change to be loved. It loves you because you are. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole. But few survive the weight of having to be someone they're not, just to remain inside a circle that never truly saw them. And when you realize you're living a story you didn't write, the pain arrives. Not a screaming pain, but a silent one. A tightness in your chest. A constant feeling that you're living someone else's life. You weren't born to mirror someone else's fears. You were born to reflect your soul. But before you remember who you are, you must face the wounds that wear the name of care. Because not all kindness feels light, and not every advice comes from love. The wounds that wear the name of care you grew up hearing you were too sensitive, too dramatic, insecure, immature. But were you really? Or was what hurt in you simply the reflection of what they didn't know how to hold in themselves? Because sometimes criticism comes wrapped in sweet words. I'm only saying this for your own good. You wouldn't be able to handle it. I'm telling you because I love you. But the tone cuts, the eyes weigh, the intention confuses, and you, still small on the inside, begin to doubt your own intuition. You start thinking you're overreacting, making things up, that you have to improve to be worthy. But you're not the one who's wrong. Many times, the person who hurts you is just unloading their own shadow onto your body. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But most people don't want to understand. They want to push away, reject, project. When someone can't bear their own failure, they'll say you won't succeed. When someone buried their own desires, they'll say yours are absurd. When someone never had the courage to try, they'll say you're reckless for trying. Constant criticism isn't clarity, it's unhealed pain. But the most dangerous part is when that voice becomes yours. When you begin to monitor yourself, trim yourself, question yourself before you even act. When the fear of others' judgment already lives inside you, and suddenly, the prison no longer has a face, it has your voice. But something in you starts to wonder, starts to ask, what if all this care was never really about me? What if this constant concern was just a way to keep me exactly where they are? True love never shrinks you to keep you safe. It expands you. It encourages you. It holds your hand, but never cuts your wings. And maybe you're beginning to see that, but seeing the wound is not enough. You have to see what keeps it open. And often what holds that pain in place is guilt. Yes, it's time to walk through the weight of a guilt that isn't yours. The weight of a guilt that isn't yours. You feel the pressure before you even say no, as if the simple act of pulling away already carries the weight of betrayal, as if thinking of yourself were an insult to everything they did for you. After everything I've done, you're just going to abandon me? You're going to hurt me like this? And so you step back, not out of love, but out of guilt. You get a kiss, but lose a piece of yourself. You offer presence, but silence what's screaming inside. Because they taught you that being good means giving until you disappear. That being grateful means accepting everything, even what destroys you. That love is a debt, and that if you dare to leave, you are cruel. But who said loving means never leaving? Carl Jung understood the power of guilt within families. It's not just an emotion, It's a mechanism, an invisible thread that pulls you back every time you try to break free. And the worst part is, you believe it. You believe you're wrong. You believe you're breaking something sacred. You believe you have to choose, either save yourself or keep belonging. But guilt is not a compass. It doesn't point to what is right. It points to where fear was planted. And as long as you live trying not to hurt anyone, you'll keep hurting yourself. But what if this guilt was never yours to carry? What if it was passed down generation after generation, like a silent emotional inheritance? Mothers who were never allowed to leave, raised daughters who don't know how to walk away, fathers who were never heard, raised sons who don't know how to say no. And in this cycle, love becomes a debt, and freedom becomes punishment. But there is something stronger than guilt: truth. And your truth is starting to ask for space. Even if it trembles, even if it hurts, because deep down you already know. The ones who truly love you don't hold you through pain. But there is a pain even more hidden, more silent, the one you learn to normalize. And now, it's time to face it. The voice that hurt you became your own. That's just how he is. She's always been like that. Don't take it personally. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you convinced yourself you were overreacting just to keep fitting into what they called normal? But what is normal when affection screams? When the tone always wounds? When every conversation is a silent war between who you are and what they expect you to tolerate? Abuse doesn't always leave visible marks. Sometimes it hides in words, in the joke that stings, in the comment that belittles, in the critique that shows up every time you try to be whole. At first, you defend yourself. Then, you doubt. And finally, you believe. You believe you're weak. You believe you're difficult. You believe you deserve the silence, the scolding, the coldness. And without realizing it, that voice that once cut you becomes the one you repeat inside, judging you, shrinking you, convincing you that love must be earned. Carl Jung spoke of the wounded child, the one who keeps searching for love in the same places where they were first hurt. And you, unknowingly, keep going back, not because you're foolish, but because no one ever showed you what love looks like when it doesn't hurt. You learned that to love is to endure. That affection comes with yelling. That respect is a luxury. And that the one who makes you cry also offers you comfort. But that's not love. It's repetition. The repetition of ancient patterns. The shadow of voices that once shaped you and still echo, even if the mouths that spoke them are now silent. And the question that remains is, how long will you keep calling yourself by the names they gave you, when you still didn't know who you were? Because it's not just about what they did to you. It's about what you started doing to yourself. But there's something in you that's tired, a soul that no longer wants to endure in the name of ties that only tighten. A part of you that's beginning to whisper, this isn't love, this is survival. And to get out of it, you'll need to face the hardest truth. The prison built with promises of love. You grew up believing family was everything. That true love endures all. That blood is stronger than any pain. But no one told you that some ties feel more like handcuffs than hugs. Because from a young age, you were told that being a good daughter meant not causing trouble. That being a good sister meant giving in. That being part of a family meant staying silent when it hurt. And so, you stayed. Even when something inside you wanted to run. Even when your body screamed for space. Even when your heart said, this is wrong. But you were the one who was wrong. At least, that's what they made you believe. That freedom was ingratitude. That wanting another life was abandonment. That walking away would hurt those who only wanted the best for you. So you stayed. You stayed in the role they gave you. You stayed in a house that never fit you. You stayed in the rituals, the dates, the obligations. You even stayed away from yourself. Carl Jung spoke about the family unconscious, about how we repeat destinies we never chose simply because belonging feels safer than solitude. But what price? Are you paying just to keep belonging? How many dreams have you shelved? How many versions of yourself were never born? How many no's did you swallow to avoid disappointment? And the cruelest part is that all of this came in the name of love. But love does not require you to betray yourself. Love does not ask you to sacrifice your soul for a seat at Sunday's table. If someone loves you, but only the version of you that is quiet, obedient, and adaptable, then it's not you who is being loved. It's the fantasy they created of you, and you no longer fit inside that fantasy. You are not the guardian of your family's silence. You were not born to carry the pain they never had the courage to heal. But before you break those chains, something has to happen. Something that's not rebellion nor escape. It's deeper, more intimate, more honest. It's the moment when something inside you finally says, enough. And that's what comes now. The day your soul said, enough. The day your soul said, enough. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a scream. It was almost silence. A different silence. A silence that, for the first time, wasn't submission. It was awareness. It was your body, tired of tension. Your throat, exhausted from swallowing truths. Your soul, refusing to stay asleep inside a role it never chose. And then, you felt it. Something inside may be small, may be quiet, saying, no more. You didn't run, but you didn't go back either. You didn't explain, but you didn't accept. You didn't slam the door, but you left it ajar, just enough to breathe. And that's when everything began to change. Because the real rupture rarely begins outside. It begins within. When what you feel becomes louder than what you pretend. When discomfort no longer fits inside excuses. When the old script starts to fail, and you can't recite it anymore. And no, it wasn't selfishness. It was clarity. You weren't walking away from love. You were walking away from the prison they called love. Carl Jung said true transformation happens when we face the shadow and choose the light. But that light isn't gentle. It burns, because it illuminates everything you let slide, everything you accepted, everything you tolerated, just to not lose someone else. But now you start to see that what you were really losing was you. You, who became so many versions just to keep the peace. You who apologized for feeling. You who asked forgiveness for wanting to live your own life. But the soul never lies, and it can no longer live in chains just to preserve someone else's peace, so you breathe. And in that breath, a new certainty arrives. I am not responsible for the pain of others. And if you're not responsible for healing what you didn't cause, then maybe, for the first time, you can choose yourself. But how do you choose yourself? After a lifetime of being programmed to care for everyone but you. That's what the next step will reveal. You owe nothing but your freedom. You spent your entire life trying to be good. A good daughter, a good granddaughter, a good woman, good for everyone, except yourself. And now standing at this quiet crossroads, you wonder, what if I just stop trying to please? What if, for the first time, I don't go back, you don't owe your life to anyone? And yet, they placed on your shoulders the responsibility of not disappointing, of not breaking tradition, of not stepping out of a role they wrote long before you ever learned to write your own name. But you didn't ask to be born into someone else's pain. You weren't sent here to repay unresolved stories or to continue what was left unfinished. In another generation, you came to be whole. You came to break the cycle.